The 10 most important paintings by Leonardo da Vinci. Number 10. Adoration of the Magi, from 1481 to 1482 AD. In Florence, at the end of the 15th century, the celebration of the Epiphany represented a recurring theme in artistic production, as it embodied values of faith and magnificence. It was in this context that a young Leonardo da Vinci was commissioned to paint the Adoration of the Magi for the convent of San Donato in Scopeto. The influence of great masters and the cultural effervescence of the city shaped the artist's vision, who took on the challenge of renewing a traditional theme with his personal stamp. The unfinished work reveals the first steps of a monumental composition. At the center is the Madonna and Child, surrounded by the three wise men and other characters, all immersed in an atmosphere of movement and expectation. The underlying drawing and the still visible strokes demonstrate Leonardo's constant process of experimentation. The use of perspective and preliminary sfumato to unify the figures in space stands out, achieving a sense of depth and dynamism. For Leonardo, this project meant an important exercise in composition and a search for expressive resources. The interest in human anatomy, for example, can be seen in the varied range of postures and gestures that surround the main scene. Likewise, the attention paid to chiaroscuro advances his future technique, evidencing the innovative approach that in a few years he would consolidate in more mature works. The Adoration of the Magi, despite not being finished, is fundamental in the history of art, as it bears witness to the concerns and early evolution of a genius. The magnetism of the piece lies precisely in its unfinished nature, which allows us to glimpse Leonardo's creative process and his desire for perfection. Throughout the centuries, scholars and artists have found in this evolved sketch a valuable resource to understand the genesis of Leonardo's painting and the aesthetic revolution of the Renaissance. Number 9. Saint John the Baptist, from 1513 to 1516 AD. At the beginning of the 16th century, Europe was experiencing a period of religious and intellectual transformation that coincided with Leonardo da Vinci's artistic maturity. Saint John the Baptist, one of his last paintings, reflects the change in the spiritual environment that began to question the traditional structures of the Church. Probably located in France during the creation of the work, Leonardo absorbed the influences of the royal court and continued to perfect his introspective and subtle style. The portrait of the saint is characterized by his enigmatic smile and his hand pointing upwards, a gesture that refers to his prophetic mission of announcing the arrival of Christ. The sfumato technique is masterfully used to envelop the figure in a halo of darkness, enhancing the drama of the scene and the feeling of mystery. The use of light and darkness shows Leonardo's interest in psychological depth, rather than in mere sacred representation. In Leonardo's career, Saint John the Baptist reveals the degree of synthesis and refinement achieved after years of constant research. The saint's body, outlined with anatomical precision, suggests the fusion between scientific studies and devotional sensitivity. The insinuation of an indefinite landscape and the atmosphere surrounding the figure demonstrate Leonardo's desire to place the sacred in an ambiguous context, enhancing the spiritual and dreamlike effect. This painting has influenced the later representation of saints and religious figures, due to the way it humanizes the divine character and focuses attention on his gaze and gesture. With a mixture of serenity and magnetism, Saint John the Baptist became an example of the evolution of sacred portraiture during the Renaissance, marking a high point in Leonardo's career and a reference for artists seeking to express the inner dimension of their religious figures. Number 8. The Annunciation, from 1472 to 1475 AD. In the mid-15th century, Florence was experiencing an artistic fervor sustained by religious passion and humanist renewal. It was in this climate of devotional fervor and search for ideal beauty that the Annunciation emerged, attributed to a young Leonardo da Vinci, in collaboration with his teacher Andrea del Verrocchio. The work, conceived for a sacred space, was to convey the solemnity of the moment when the angel Gabriel appears before Mary. The composition is carefully distributed. The angel is located on the left, holding a lily that symbolizes purity, while the Virgin is on the right, reading at a lectern, surprised by the news. The landscape in the background, with blurred mountains and a play of light and shadow, reveals Leonardo's early inclination for sfumato and the study of atmosphere. Despite its apparent simplicity, the scene contains delicate details, such as the harmonious posture of the angel and the reserved gesture of Mary. In Leonardo's career, this painting represents one of the first testimonies of his emerging genius. Although there are features that belong to Verrocchio's workshop, it is possible to identify the subtle treatment of the Virgin's face and the transparency in the angel's wings, the fruit of the research that would characterize Leonardo's approach. The intention to give life and emotion to a biblical episode is present in the interaction between the characters and the innovative use of perspective. Over the centuries, the Annunciation has been appreciated as a fundamental work for understanding Leonardo's formation. Its treatment of light and atmosphere announced the painter's later advances in three-dimensional representation and in the psychology of the subjects portrayed. Number 7. Portrait of Ginevra de Benci. From the year 1474 to the year 1478 AD. In 15th century Florence, wealthy families sought to immortalize their lineage through portraits that blended elegance and realism. Ginevra de Benci, a member of an influential Florentine circle, commissioned her portrait from a young Leonardo da Vinci, who already showed an unusual talent for anatomical observation. This city, the epicenter of banking and culture, fostered an effervescent environment for art, in which a love of beauty and an obsession with precise detail converged. The painting is distinguished by the sober pose of the young woman, who appears looking at the viewer with a serious and slightly melancholic expression. The background, with a landscape of vegetation and water, serves to highlight the main figure, applying the sfumato technique to soften the contours and create an effect of mystery. The colorful content and careful modeling of the face underline Leonardo's virtuosity in the representation of skin and human expression. This portrait is a key testimony to the first stage of Leonardo's career, in which he sought to consolidate his personal style. Still in his apprenticeship, he was already developing a rigor in the study of perspective and light. The naturalness of the posture, the subtlety in the chromatic gradation and the exploration of the psychology of the character reflect the innovative Renaissance vision of an artist who was just beginning to forge his legacy. Over the centuries, Benci's portrait of Ginevra has been valued for its contribution to the evolution of the female portrait in Western painting. It represents the transition towards a more introspective and human representation, where social status gives way to the personality and sensitivity of the model. In this way, it is consolidated as one of Leonardo's first steps towards the mastery that he would achieve in his later works. Number 6. Salvator Mundi, from 1499 to 1510 AD. At the turn of the 15th century into the 16th century, the image of Christ as the Savior of the world was of particular interest to European courts eager for highly refined sacred works. Salvator Mundi emerged in this context, attributed to Leonardo da Vinci, who was commissioned by a nobleman or ecclesiastical dignitary. The importance of the religious representation and the prestige of having a renowned artist made this painting a coveted treasure. The uniqueness of the work lies in the frontal representation of Christ, holding a crystal sphere in his left hand and blessing with his right. The sphere, which reflects the artist's scientific ingenuity, symbolizes divine creation and at the same time demonstrates his understanding of optics and light. The delicacy in the transition of tones of the face and the subtle application of sfumato provide an aura of serenity and psychological depth, essential characteristics of the Leonardo style. Throughout Leonardo's career, this painting embodies his constant fascination with the fusion between the material and the immaterial, science and faith. The meticulous study of the anatomy of the hands and the gesture of blessing show the artist's concern for anatomical truth, while imbuing the scene with a mystical aura that transcends the merely human. As in his other paintings, color and composition are articulated with sobriety to focus attention on the face of Christ and his penetrating gaze. Salvator Mundi has acquired significant relevance in the history of art not only because of its attribution to Leonardo, but also because of the multiple questions about authorship, restorations, and symbolic value that have arisen over the centuries. The work reveals the Renaissance obsession with the union of the divine and the earthly, elevating the artist to the category of intermediary between science and spirituality in the representation of the sacred figure. Number 5. The Virgin of the Rocks. From the year 1483 to the year 1486 AD. In the transition from the 15th to the 16th century, the cult of the Virgin acquired great relevance in Christian iconography, driving artists of the time to explore new forms of representation. Leonardo da Vinci accepted the commission for the Virgin of the Rocks for a chapel of the Immaculate Conception in Milan, in a period in which religious devotion and scientific advances were deeply intertwined. The city was experiencing a cultural and architectural flourishing that demanded works capable of exalting the mysteries of faith with a renewed spirit. The composition of the painting is characterized by the pyramidal arrangement of the Virgin, the infant Jesus, the infant Saint John the Baptist, and the angel, all in a rocky landscape evoking caves and mountain formations. Leonardo introduced sfumato in this work to soften the contours and confer a nebulous atmosphere that envelops the figures, reinforcing the mysticism of the scene. The carefully orchestrated study of light and shadow generates a sense of depth that was unusual at the time, reflecting the artist's rigorous observation of nature. In Leonardo's career, this painting marked a decisive step towards stylistic maturity. In it, the painter applied botanical and geological studies to give realism to the environment, while capturing a subtle emotional interaction between the characters. The gesture of the Virgin, pointing to the child, and the gaze of the angel draw attention to the divine relationship between the infants and reinforce the theological symbolism of the composition. Throughout time, the Virgin of the Rocks has been the object of artistic and devotional veneration. This altarpiece offers a preview of the future achievements of the Renaissance in terms of perspective, anatomy, and expression. Its ability to combine earthly and celestial elements in the same pictorial space has made the work an essential reference for understanding the innovation and transcendental beauty that characterize Leonardo da Vinci's work. Number 4. Lady with an Ermine, 1489 to 1490 AD. In the late 15th century, high society in Europe began to demand portraits that emphasized both the social position and inner personality of the sitter. Leonardo da Vinci, who was based at the court of Milan under the patronage of Ludovico Sforza, was commissioned to portray Cecilia Gallerani, one of the muses of the courtly world. Milanese culture, steeped in political intrigue and refined artistic tastes, provided the ideal background for Lady with an Ermine. Technically, the painting is executed on wood with oil paint, a resource that allowed Leonardo to explore tonal gradations and infuse warmth into the skin and subtle modeling of the figure. The depiction of the Ermine, a symbol of purity and status, reflects the artist's ability to incorporate symbolic elements without detracting from the lady's face. Sfumato, applied delicately to the contours, creates an enveloping atmosphere and a fluid transition between light and shadow. For Leonardo, this portrait meant the opportunity to perfect his study of facial anatomy and gestures, in order to capture the essence and vivacity of his subject. The slightly turned pose and the absorbed gaze of the young woman suggest a moment frozen in time, infusing the composition with a sense of intimacy and emotional closeness that few artists had achieved until then. Throughout history, the lady with an ermine has been valued as a paradigmatic example of Renaissance portraiture and of Leonardo's ability to fuse scientific rigor and aesthetic sensitivity. This painting has inspired numerous creators and researchers, who find in its studied simplicity and subtlety of detail a model of perfection in the art of portraiture, while revealing the sophistication of Milanese court society. Number 3. The Vitruvian Man, 1490. During the intellectual heyday of the 15th century, artists and thinkers on the Italian peninsula sought to understand the human being from a rational and harmonious perspective. Leonardo da Vinci channeled this concern into the Vitruvian Man, an ink drawing depicting human anatomy in relation to perfect geometry, inspired by the writings of the Roman architect Vitruvius. The era encouraged the union between science, art, and philosophy, thus promoting the study of proportion and symmetry. The human figure, shown within a square and a circle, illustrates the correspondence between the body and mathematical principles. The precision of the lines and the thoroughness with which the muscles and joints are represented reflect Leonardo's obsession with anatomical study. This work, more than a simple drawing exercise, expresses the Renaissance vision that man is the measure of all things and the point of convergence between the earthly and the divine. The influence of this study on Leonardo's career is crucial to understanding his working philosophy. By fusing empirical observation and theoretical foundations, he established a research method that he would apply in disciplines as diverse as engineering, botany, and optics. The Vitruvian Man thus became a symbol of his relentless search for truth and universal beauty. This drawing has transcended its status as a sketch and has become an emblem of the connection between art and science. Throughout history, it has been an essential reference in the debate about ideal beauty and divine proportion. Its iconic power lies in the simplicity of its form and the depth of its message, consolidating itself as one of the most important legacies of the Renaissance period and of Leonardo's work. Number 2. The Last Supper, from 1495 to 1498 AD. In 15th century Milan, the patronage of the Sforza court prompted ambitious artistic projects, including Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. In a context of prosperity and political rivalry, the great Milanese families sought to reflect their power through architecture and painting, giving artists such as Leonardo the opportunity to put into practice their boldest innovations. The fresco was commissioned for the refectory of the convent of Santa Maria delle Grazie, where monastic life demanded a decoration with spiritual meaning and transcendence. The technique used is an experimental combination of dry paint and tempera, a method that the artist chose to gain flexibility and precision, but which proved fragile over time. The composition, organized in groups of 3 apostles, directs attention to the central figure of Christ, whose gesture and countenance condense the dramatic tension of the moment. Each facial expression and body posture suggests different emotions: surprise, doubt, trembling faith, and a feeling of devotion that colors the scene. In Leonardo's career, this work marks a milestone of compositional and psychological innovation. His determination to capture the reaction of each apostle to the announcement of the betrayal redefines the notion of narrative in sacred painting. In addition, it introduces an almost theatrical perspective that directs the gaze toward the table and the serene face of Christ, emphasizing the emotional and symbolic importance of the moment represented. The Last Supper has had a profound influence on the history of religious art, becoming an example of how the Renaissance genius can transform a traditional theme into a new artistic and intellectual experience. Even though it has deteriorated over the centuries, the painting has been the subject of studies, replicas, and restorations that attest to its enormous relevance and the continuing interest it arouses as a paradigm of Renaissance narrative and technical skill. Number 1. The Mona Lisa, from 1503 to 1519 AD. In 16th century Florence, the search for the aesthetic ideal found its highest expression in the works of artists who combined inventiveness and technical mastery. It was in this environment, rich in cultural change and the expansion of the humanities, that Leonardo da Vinci undertook the creation of the Mona Lisa. The city, cradle of brilliant minds and prosperous merchants, offered a unique environment in which experimentation and direct observation of reality became essential for the creation of new forms of art. The Florentine court, open to the ideas of the humanists, encouraged the exploration of perspective and anatomical study. This portrait is notable for its sfumato technique, a method characteristic of Leonardo that blurs the contours to create a hazy and enigmatic effect. The soft evident here in the representation of the atmosphere and the illusion of depth, the result of constant studies of anatomy and optics. Likewise, the work highlights the evolution of the Renaissance portrait, which moves from the simple representation of the client to a deeper interest in psychology and personality. This painting stands as a universal symbol of mystery and mastery. Both her enigmatic smile and the precision of her technique have elevated her to the status of a cultural icon. Her fame has grown over the years, attracting scholars and curious people who marvel at the harmony of forms and the sense of life that emanates from her pictorial surface, confirming her privileged place among the most influential artistic creations of humanity. Thank you for watching our video. Subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. Give it a like, comment your thoughts, and share this video with your friends and family.